Our vision has to be bigger than our escape route. It's easy to numb out with social media or the news or politics, but then they never know the price of the relationship with themselves because it's always about something outside of themselves. Passion without proper skill and frame equals bankruptcy. It equals loneliness. It equals nothingness. Like, be passionate about a hobby, find ways that you can evolve. But if you think it's all just going to be perfect right from the get-go, I mean, maybe that happens for some. I don't think it happens for many. I tried cannabis. I just slept through it. It had no positive impact. I hated it. I woke up, I was high, everything was slow. But MDMA.
Almost Q4 2024, where we're going into an election. How do you think Donald Trump winning or Kamala Harris winning will impact one's ability to make money?
Well,
I just heard you do a live podcast with JP Newman.
yeah.
And that was a blast. And it was some deep shit, mental shit that's really relevant to entrepreneurs. It's relevant to everybody, but there was a heavy focus on kind of things that are important for wealth creation and life from an entrepreneurial perspective. But the more that I think about that kind of stuff, the more allowance I give myself when I'm talking to people here to talk about whatever the fuck, because ultimately it is all relevant. Yeah. And ultimately mindset and how you spend your personal time and how you act and how you live has a tremendous impact on your business.
And I think that I was just thinking driving here, I was like, what is the difference between like a 7-figure, an 8-figure, 9-figure and above? And I realized like the reason I got to 8 figures and not more is because I work so much on my skill sets and not enough on my team skill sets. Now we got to 8 figures because of the team skill sets, but those happened almost accidentally because I left for a month or for a summer and they had to just grow up and develop. And that was awesome because they just figured things out when I wasn't around. When I was around, we were stuck at 7 figures, even though it was mid 7 figures, because it was personality based. It wasn't enough system based. It was reliant on me being on stages or even on a podcast. And when I was gone, it was like, cool. They had to run ads. They had to do creative and copy and build that out. And they just matured and figured it out. And then we sold hundreds of thousands of my books because of their skills, right? And I got to be in Italy for the summer. And I just realized like selecting your team and having the right people, even like just one badass that's like the operations person makes such a world of difference because they can systematize and operationalize the things that really hold the 7-figure entrepreneur back. Because you and I have seen plenty of people get to 7 figures because they just work hard.
Sure.
And they burn out and they're exhausted and they don't know how to offload because they're just so deeply entrenched in it. And this is one of the fascinating things is if you just develop a life that you really enjoy and not let business be the only thing, then all of a sudden your business is either going to sink or swim, but it can definitely swim if you have the right people around you.
It very much fits the frame of you can hear something 100 times and the 101st all of a sudden is meaningful to you.
Yeah.
But you can hear somebody say, get the right people around you. It's all about hiring. It's all about team. But until you figure out what the fuck that means and how you're interacting with the people and what you expect the people to do, whether you're dictating things or collaborating or expecting them to bring it, how you run it makes a huge fucking difference.
How do you inspire them? Like all those factors.
Are you supposed to inspire them? Right?
Yeah,
or are they supposed to come with their own, toolkit or whatever?
Yeah. I love like if you have someone that doesn't rent space in your head. When you're away from the business, you're not worried or thinking about them because they just know what to do, how to get it done. They're thinking ahead. They treat it like it's their role and responsibility, not waiting for some instruction. And I didn't tell me to do it or I did my best, all that kind of stuff. I mean, look, IBM said that an A-teamer was 5,200% more productive than a B-teamer.
Oh, shit.
Think about that, 5,200%. And I've noticed like, if we're in this price cost value model, which is price is what we pay, cost is the economic impact, value is our feeling and perception and satisfaction and fulfillment. Like if in the world of hiring, price should be a much like, what if they're 50% more expensive on the price, but they're 5,200% more productive?
Yeah. Yeah. That took me like fucking 15 years to figure out.
Dude, Steve Jobs, the asshole that he was, just realized there's no better advantage in the world of money than top talent. And he said, I could accomplish with 5 people what people expected to be hundreds. And when you think hundreds, there's a lot more complication, personality,
crazy.
conflict, chaos, all those kind of things. And it's funny because you said, you can hear something 100 times and then it's 101st. Well, I remember I was in Chicago. Our servers were down. This was a long time ago. We had voice over IP phones weren't working. Our email wasn't working. And I'm talking to my mentor and I'm just bitching about it. He goes, do you think if this happened to Warren Buffett, he would say any of this? Do you think that he would know all this was going on? Do you think if he walked in the office, this is the first thing they would tell him about? Or they'd just be excited to see him? I was like, and that was the first time working on the business versus in the business became a real reality for me. I was like, oh, damn, I am the bottleneck. I'm too involved in too many pieces. I have my fingerprints on too many things. And so I just made a deal with myself that day. I'm like, I'm not answering any question that a team member can answer.
Oh,
so if someone calls and they're like, and even if I know the answer, I'm like, oh, Trisha knows that. Let me connect you. She's the best. Someone's referring in. I'm like, oh, let me get you to Bobby. Bobby's the person that does that. Because as soon as I circumvent that because it's efficient in the moment, it becomes less effective in the long run. And I just realized I was creating the bottleneck.
That's a really good fucking lesson. Or it's a really good lesson. It's not really about fucking.
And I still feel like sometimes, and I'd love to challenge my thinking on this. Sometimes I think the reason why people don't go from 8 to 9 figures is there's a corporate crossover. I kind of think of when I started my business, getting a sailboat, super cool. And then one day, the waves aren't cooperating, the winds aren't cooperating. So, or just too much going on. So I hire an assistant to help me. We see just a speedboat cruising along. We're like, shit, look at that speedboat. But the assistant's like, no, I'm a sailboat person. So I'm trying to go to the speedboat and they're trying to say, here's why we should stay a sailboat. So they just hold me back. And if I bring them to the speedboat, they're going to continue to fight.
Yeah.
So sometimes they don't get to come along. And then I see a yacht and I'm like, dude, that yacht? Are you kidding me? I could relax sometimes and that looks a lot more fun. But I think that to go from 8 to 9 figures, you're building a battleship. It's everybody knows their role. Everybody knows their position. The owner can get on an aircraft and take off, but you can handle any wave. You can handle every enemy because you're built for it. But that isn't as seductive. That isn't as exciting. That isn't as romantic. That isn't as maybe lifestyle founder based, connected to the outcome. Because I think for me, I just like when people would come up and I knew my customer.
Right.
And they would talk to me and they were excited about what I had done. And, eventually I'm like, well, I can't really coach one-on-one this much anymore. So I'm going to reserve that for 2 clients a month. And, eventually we had 2,200 customers paying monthly and I couldn't have told you a dozen of them.
Right.
Because I'm just looking at a computer screen.
Yeah.
And so it just removed all of the enjoyment. So we got to ask, what do we want in the first place?
So I've told the story before, but not to you. My father had a business, his partner, he was a doctor, his son sold real estate and he was probably 10 years older than me, 8 years older than me or something. And he told me, oddly, he had grown up selling credit card terminals, which is just a hilarious coincidence that's where I ended up essentially. But he got into real estate and he said, when I was looking for the next thing to do, I was very conscious that selling credit card terminals was incredibly transactional. Mm-hmm. And I would get my rush from selling 5 sales a day. And when I got into real estate, I had to figure out where I was going to derive the feeling of success from. And so he had to deliberately associate a certain behavior. In his case, it was each step along the process, he would celebrate the win, right? Setting up the appointment, getting the listing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's something that I carried with me.
Very aware.
Yeah. When you think about your story and your path and that transition, was that conscious for you, or did you have to figure that out? Oh shit, I hate this now. I don't like this. I'm not getting any satisfaction out of what I thought I would get.
That's why I sold my business. I had to figure it out. I sold at the worst time. I was disenchanted. We were scaling, and I was like, the more we scaled, the less connected I felt, and the more it became about a balance sheet and an income statement, unless it became about value creation and connection. So I was like, yeah, every business says it has values, but there's one thing for values to live on a wall. There's another thing for values to live inside of a person. So I've really taken the last 3 years going well, what do I really value? Mm-hmm. What really matters? I was like, well, one, when I feel like I can see someone, and they feel seen and heard by me, dude, that's an amazing moment. It's a moment of intimacy. So I was like, I know I want more of that. I was like, I can't tell you how many people that I'll just talk to them and say, well, I've got you. Like, I've got like, and they're financially whatever. I'm like, I've got your back. And they're like, there's a connection there. So I'm like, ooh, I like that. And I'm like, what if I helped you create a life you didn't want to retire from? Like, that's a fun game. Even if you chose to do less work, even if you chose to sell, but like, what if we just designed a better life along the way? And then what if we like, just, what if I could just fall in love with my customers? Just like truly care about them, become lifelong friends with some. Now, okay, that's not overly scalable in some ways.
Right.
I can only meet with 2 people a year or a month one-on-one, but they come to the cabin where you've been.
Mm-hmm.
It's like my favorite place on the planet. We dive deep really quickly. I assemble their team and we stay in touch. So that's cool. That gives me like content. That gives me connection. But then I've created a community where I'm live with them every week, but I can see them even though it's virtual. And I communicate with them in an app because those things mattered to me. Mm-hmm. And so I took the time to say, if I'm going to create this, what would keep me engaged for 20 years? What could I still see myself doing? And I was like, community, absolutely. Being vulnerable and letting them be vulnerable, because there's not a safe space in finance. Like, most people don't want to tell their financial advisor about their shortcomings or their money story because it's a transactional thing. And then I'm like,
and it's usually not that kind of relationship.
Right. And so I'm not really in the transactional game. I mean, I used to sell life insurance from like 98 through 2006, and I just was kind of bored with that. So I just wrote a book that explains the whole thing with what the Rockefellers do. So I don't have to have that daily conversation. I could have a bigger context of legacy as a conversation, and insurance fits in there in a small piece instead of the main piece, which made my life better. So I had to define my win, play a better game, enjoy the process along the way, not allow this like behemoth to grow without me saying my piece. I was like, oh, I just want to be a good business partner. We'll just do, yeah, that's a good idea. And then I like deep down, I'm like, I don't want to do that. And so, yeah, it would be taken away from me in a way that most people are like, oh, that's cool. You don't have to do that anymore and you still get paid. I'm like, yeah, but it's not what I want to do.
Yeah.
And to keep that money coming to me, I would not be able to do these other things I wanted to do.
Do you think you could have, in retrospect, do you think instead of selling the business, you could have redesigned it and redefined your role so that you could do what you wanted to do and still kept the business?
I considered that. I would have had to buy out one partner. He didn't want to sell. It was a complicated relationship. My shortcomings are I show up and I inspire, and then I abandon. Like the team's super excited. Oh, dude, Garrett's in like we're having fun. We might have a workout with the whole team. We might,
good
I
thing
might
married,
come and and then I'm like, oh, I'm going to go write this book, and you're not going to hear from me, or I'm going to go on these stages, and you're not going to see me. Where he was consistent,
right?
But he governed by scarcity, so we're in direct odds. Like everything was reduction and cut back and anger and you're not enough. And I'm like over there being like, hey, let's build you up. So it was like we just had divergent styles that couldn't come together. There was no way. We tried.
Yeah.
He was amazing at cleaning my life up early on because I created chaos,
right?
Which is part of what happens when you're a creator. But then eventually it stifled that creativity. Mm-hmm. And so when I first said, okay, I'll sell, but I'll do a licensing deal. I'll still create content. I'll still show up and do some teaching. And we grew for 2 years. And then one day he was like, I don't want you speaking at this event. And I don't like you hanging out with this person. I was like, what? I was like, I grew up and left my house and now I'm in this financial house. And he's like, well, I'm not going to pay you this licensing stuff if you do that. And he was contractually within his rights to do that. And I was like, then I guess we're done. And I fully divorced that business a year ago, fully. 9 figures, I'm all for it. But this time, more communication, way more clarity about like who I am, what I do, what I don't do, where I partner, where I don't, like what my personal brand is. Like I just was naive, and I also didn't recognize when I was being manipulated. Like I just thought I was being a good guy. I was just being a jackass. I just wasn't. But part of that was my upbringing, and I had to figure that out and learn those lessons personally. But now I'll have new mistakes. Hopefully I don't make those ones again.
Yeah. Well, I like to say that I'm very good at learning from my own mistakes after I've made them a bunch of times.
Yeah, people don't make the same mistakes twice. It's like 15, 16 times.
Yeah.
Then it's really painful. And then my wife's like, you think you learned the lesson this time? Got it.
Maybe. We'll see.
Carrie just lets me go through my process, which is pretty amazing because I'm not good at doing that for like at the same rate that like she'll just let me discover, ask some questions.
It's probably necessary.
Not come across judgmental.
Yeah.
You know, and then sometimes I'm like, oh, we just lost this amount of money. She's like, we live in this great house and we have our cabin and kids are going to the same schools and we're eating the same food. So we'll be fine. Like, cool. That's good.
That's awesome. That's an awesome partnership.
Yeah, it's because I fell in love with her at Kmart and white trash recognized white trash, Brad. You know what I'm saying?
A very long time ago.
I went in when I was 19, she was 18, and she was working at a Kmart. My buddy's sister, and I walked in, I was like, I love this girl. And I was like, whoa, I'm not nearly mature enough to have these feelings.
And then you did.
Waited years.
Okay.
So I wouldn't mess the relationship up.
Oh, well, that's a little wisdom.
22 years married now. Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild. It's different life paths, my friend. Different life paths.
Right.
Well, let me, for some context, since we just started jumping in and talking about random shit, we did record once before in the old studio, and we talked like business tactics, strategies, tax stuff.
Tax, right?
Yeah. And your sort of initial path into entrepreneurship was super interesting to me. I learned more about kind of the interesting quarters of it earlier today with JP. But let's talk about that for a minute as backdrop. Yeah. So we were just talking about a financial education company teaching people about financial investments and wealth creation. Somewhat of a unicorn because we didn't do financial transactions. Yeah.
And we were doing, 8 figures.
Yep.
Doing financial education and coaching.
Yep.
Even though I came from a background of financial transaction.
Yeah. You were doing well doing that too. Doing financial products, right? Namely selling life insurance.
Yeah, I just got super bored.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, so you're going to walk away from all these renewals? And I was like, yeah, because if I don't, I'm going to be unhappy.
See that? And that's super uncommon. And it also seems to be a through line in your life, at least as of late. But let's go to the beginning because you grew up in a coal mine. Not quite, but kind of.
Yeah. My dad was a coal miner.
Yep.
He wouldn't let me go in a coal mine.
He wouldn't?
I've never been in one.
Oh, wow.
A couple of years ago, I was like, Dad, why don't we take my sons and show them a coal mine? He's like, why would we do that? I was like, well, I mean, you worked in one. He's like, no, they don't need to see that. So my mom overheard the conversation. She's like, watch this show on Netflix called Mine 9. And I watched, I was like, damn, dude, like coal mining, that's some gnarly stuff. And my dad was on mine rescue. So he pulled out dead bodies during the Crandall Canyon mine disaster. And there was another one, the Wilburg mine disaster. Like he's seen some pretty horrific stuff. And he was crawling through mine rescue thinking, hey, I don't know if this thing's going to collapse. And he went home and the people on the next shift, it collapsed on them. So like that dude he's a good man, like such a great father. And I asked him one of his biggest regrets. And he's like, well, I should have worked harder in school and not done coal mining. But he was going to college. He was playing basketball. And then his dad had some issues because the mines were on strike and he had a bunch of siblings. So he went and kind of worked to take care of the family. And what's cool about him is, I mean, he went and got his college degree while I was, a kid. And then was able to get out of the mine some of the time, still kind of in that world, but in safety instead of in digging.
Yeah, that's some treacherous shit.
Can you imagine? Like this, look what we're doing. Yeah. We're sitting in an air-conditioned room, looks like we're in a Vegas lobby.
Yep.
Talking about whatever we want.
Yep.
Drinking our Topo Chicos, you know what I'm saying? And he's down in the coal mine.
Yeah. I mean, down in the dark, no natural light, confined spaces, collapsing rooms, the dust and the debris and the shit that you breathe in as a coal miner.
He's 71, doing well.
Yeah.
Doing well. But I mean, he's gone and done a lot of work. I've been like, hey, go see this guy, Dr. Bueller, go do somatic therapy. Like he's healthy at 71. We're going hunting next week. So he just stays hiking and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool that he was a coal miner and he's doing okay. He was worried during COVID. He's like, oh, will my lungs be able to handle it? He was fine. Because he's taking care of his health afterwards.
It's a logical concern.
Yeah, it's like the black lung makes me think of Zoolander, right? Like I would have been Derek Zoolander, like pop. I think I got the black lung. I'm in there for a half hour.
So how did that impact your choice to get into entrepreneurship and financial planning, which seems boring as shit relative to really everything in the world, actually?
My mom was determined that we would get an education, that we would take on her and my dad's work ethic for sure. but that we would have a better life than coal mining. So I went to things like Engineering State and Governor's Honors Academy and all these programs when I was a teenager to get exposed to things. I went to this thing, Governor's Honors Academy, and one of the speakers was Ren Zafiropoulos, and he was the founder of Xerox.
Oh, wow.
An entrepreneur. And he just, the way he spoke fascinated me. So I went up and interviewed him. Then we went to these people's house that were big donors to the university, where they hosted at Southern Utah University, Steve and Cindy Gilbert, and he was an entrepreneur. And so I just went and, like, because I was young, people love talking to young people that are curious.
If they're smart young people.
Yeah, I was asking good questions.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. And there aren't that many of them. That's rude. Yeah. There are lots of young, smart people. But there are also, I mean, you know, I think the ongoing narrative of you'll understand this when you're older, it's there for a reason. And that is that the impatience that is with youth typically leads to bad questions, which leads to an annoying conversation. And it's like, I don't know, express some other interest and actually learn something before we talk.
Yeah, Steve Gilbert, when I talked to him and Cindy, they were like, look, what you should do is spend time with wealthy people and offer value to them for free, just so you could be around them. Just do stuff for them. Like, too many kids, they come and they just want a job and they just want to be paid. So I had this professor, and his first year as a professor, he had just retired from being a money manager of $5 billion in municipal bond funds. So I just, as soon as I knew he wanted to get in shape, I was his guy. Hung out with him after class. We went to the gym. We played racquetball, and then we go sit down and have lunch afterwards. And I just get to ask him questions because I just, helped him get a little bit more fit. So I just looked for that opportunity, and that really helped me out because he really taught me a lot.
Is that what led you into life insurance originally?
I had this $5,000 I wanted for being Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and I wanted to invest it because I thought $5,000 was a lot of money as a teenager.
It is when you're a teenager. I mean, it was.
My first 6 months in business, I had $551 of net income off my $700 of gross revenue, right? And I was a miser, saving every dollar. The next year, I think I made like $1,800 and kept like $1,500. It was good margins using mom and dad's products in the garage type of thing.
Right.
But then I won that, and I was like, yeah, I should invest this money. But I was too young. I'd had to have a custodian sign off. But as soon as I went to college, I started asking people that like were in the fraternity that had graduated, like in finance, where would you invest? I asked, people that I knew that had more money, like my uncle or people like that, like, where do you invest? And the reality was, it was confusing. The more I asked, the more I got fragmented advice. But in that path, this girl was like, well, my dad's in finance. You should go, talk to him. So I was 4 hours away where he was, went in, and I started talking to him, and he's like, I'm gonna offer you an internship, which sounded awesome. And it goes back to like, oh, internship, even if it's not paid, I'm going to learn. It was a paid thing. It was basically, hey, come and bring your friends and family so we could pitch them life insurance and mutual funds.
Oh, damn.
Right.
You got tricked.
Yeah. 98, 99. Like, I'm making, I'm in a little school. I'm making $2,000 a month just on a advance, and I'm learning a little bit, but I'm bringing friends and family, and they're getting into mutual funds, and the market's great. Then the market's not so good in 2000. So that's when my education began. But yeah, I ended up being on, having a radio show, writing books. Like, that's where I found the fun in this whole thing. Sitting around talking about life insurance wasn't very fun.
So you told a story earlier today about being 20 as the market was collapsing, the dot-com era. So dot-com is collapsing. You had built a life insurance, I don't know how big, but a life insurance book. And then you realized that you were 20 and you didn't know what the fuck you were talking about.
Yeah, I was selling mutual funds and selling life insurance both. And I remember this guy from New York. I was selling a variable whole life policy because the 90s, the market was just crushing. This guy from New York's like, okay, the 90s was the best time we've seen in the market.
Pause on that for a second, because people that don't actually care about insurance or know what that is, variable life, meaning that the life insurance policy and the gain is tied to
the stock
market directly.
Yeah. And so I'm just following that the market's crushed. Why wouldn't I do this? And this guy's like, this is the best 10-year period of time. Let me show you what whole life did versus variable whole life. He's like, this variable whole life is like 1.5% higher in the biggest bull run ever. Now let me show you what happens in bear markets. And dude, I almost threw up in a garbage can because it was so bad. And I had put friends and family in this stuff. and I'd sold the mutual funds. And he's like, how long is the market going to be down? I'm like, I don't know. He's like, when's it going to come? Like, I just realized I'm gathering assets. I'm showing historical charts. I'm regurgitating what I'm being taught. And I'm going, I'm not getting technical analysis. I'm going to meetings and they're teaching us sales, how to build rapport, how to sell, nothing on like how this is going to work long term or what the benefits are, how you get money from it or any of that stuff. And so I then met this woman who was part of Robert Kiyosaki's financial team. And I just read Rich Dad Poor Dad. I was in Phoenix and I was like, so I just went up and started asking her questions. We're still friends to this day. And so she's like, read this, go to this. And so I, for every single month for 22 straight months while I was still in college, flew somewhere to go talk to someone, to meet with someone, to ask questions. And that gave me a pretty good body of knowledge. And what I decided to do coming out of that was, I'm going to be an efficiency expert. I'm going to save money on tax, interest, non-performing fees with investments, redesign insurance so they don't have duplicate coverages. And I also realized mindset is the key. So we built this program called the Producer Revolution. We sent these emails 5 days a week called Producer Perspectives, how to produce more than you consume. We had once a month forums that people would come attend live. That's where the joy started to come. I had a radio show, 2 hours a day.
22?
When we started the Producer Revolution, that was in 2005.
Okay.
I was 19 in 1998. So now I was like in my mid 20s, like 24 years old or whatever. And so that's when that really started to take off. And then once I did a radio show, they were like, well, you can't do this because of compliance. And so I said, well, it looks like I'm no longer selling life insurance. And I had to walk away from the renewals and just, drop my licenses at that point. And then another firm came and said, we're fine with you talking. You don't need to, we've heard your stuff. It's not a problem with compliance. And I just started referring those leads to other insurance agents and they would write the insurance and put me on the application.
Oh, interesting.
And so
you didn't maintain a license to do that?
I did. I ended up, I was like a Series 6, 65. Those are securities license. I had a life insurance license. And eventually I got my life insurance license so that I could have author's exemption and talk about what I wanted on the radio show. And the insurance company knew I was doing that.
How's that work? So
author's exemption, basically my attorney was like, hey, we need safe harbor because you're shitting on 401ks. And that's like my first book was like, and I was like, okay. So I got all these extra licenses. And then he's like, wait, there's this exemption because you're an author. So you can talk about these. You just can't give one-on-one financial advice. It's like, great. Well, I know a lot of good investment advisors. I don't want to do assets under management. I'll let them handle that. I want to build the big picture. I want to develop the philosophy. I want to create the frameworks. I want to host the events. I want to, and so that's the process I went down. And eventually I just started referring all that business out. Now, originally I was greedier than that, Brad. I was a greedy bastard. I was like, you know what?
I don't know how you couldn't be. I mean,
I'm like, I should own a mortgage company.
Yeah.
I should own a property and casualty company.
Good luck.
I should, and I started to build that and I was like, oh my God, this is so much extra effort.
Oh my God.
Nonstop. And I realized I'm too boutique. So I had no power to get a mortgage through because it was a small firm versus some of these people that's their whole world. And so then I was like, I'll just charge more for the design. And then I could refer that out. And then I went to attorneys and accountants and I said, I want you to give my clients a discount because I'll do a lot of the heavy lifting, get you the data, and then I won't take any money. I'll just refer them out, but I'll charge this fee on the front end and I can build the financial team. And that's what I built for a long time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that the ongoing sort of conversation around making money through what are functionally affiliate partnerships versus refusing to take that fee, the split there is an interesting choice because on the one hand, there is no question that building these huge revenue streams by referring product out can create a lot of money.
The amount of money that I could have made from 2015 until today on life insurance, because I ended up just selling leads instead of being on app. I have a couple guys that they make a couple $1 million a year, whether they do another piece of work just servicing that. And I made zero after selling the leads. I made a couple million selling the leads, but I didn't get the recurring revenue. So I'm kind of evolving with that model because I thought I was being like, I'm the one person that's not taking this, so I could be non-biased and I could be your advocate. And then I just realized I'm like, well, they're doing all this and I'm having to get involved. So now I just disclose.
Yeah.
I'll just say, hey, this person's offered me something, but the deal is you get the same price whether you found them without me.
Yeah.
Are you okay if I get paid on that?
Yeah.
And so instead of charging bigger fees that I was charging, like up to 150 grand for 2 years for me to work with people, now I've got it down to like 5 grand. Someone can join my community. And then there's a few transactions I can actually get paid on and keep that price down. And they're not obligated to do any of those transactions with me. As a matter of fact, other financial advisors are not referring into my community because they're having a hard time with customer service, and I refer the business back out to them. But I'm now doing the education, which I love to do.
Yeah, well, I think the other side of that path, the other choice is to not take any money in the back end.
Yep.
And then exactly what you just said, the value prop is, hey, I'm not biased, right? Look at me, I'm not biased at all. And it's a good USP, like it sells shit for sure. Makes people comfortable. Also, if you have, I guess, inside any given product category for finances or inside of like real estate, inside of an asset class or whatever, you could go to 1 million places and refer it to 1 million places. So there is another part of that angle, which is like, look, I could be sending you anywhere. And honestly, this isn't where I'm making the most money, but this is the place that you want to go to.
Well, there are some things I just choose not to make money on.
Yeah. Okay.
So if someone's doing business acquisition or real estate acquisition or any investment, I don't get paid on any of those because I want to sit on the same side of the table as my customer and help them with due diligence and risk mitigation. When it comes to tax, legal, insurance, like I'm not getting paid on legal right now, but you can own a law firm in Arizona and not be an attorney. And so I'm like, I might as well start. I sent few attorneys thousands of clients and been paid zero. And these guys don't even give me a deal on my legal work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I am looking at that a little bit differently, but only if I feel like I could get an amazing attorney that would be world-class that could then design, even if we have other people do the implementation.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
Well, all I know is the few amazing tax attorneys I've worked with have changed my world.
You threw tax in there. Tax in there changed it a little.
And the right corporate attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking shit, but
but not like I get like litigators and stuff like that. I mean, ultimately, I'm just talking about how do you get your legacy plan implemented? And I've got this guy that's willing to create packages for my clients that's used to working with higher end people that can get them the stuff that they need. Anyway.
Well, I'm talking shit because I think, attorneys in general have a reputation for sucking up time that doesn't need to be sucked up.
Especially divorce attorney.
Oh, well, that's a whole different incentive structure.
Or even a litigation. Like I was in litigation once and I thought my attorney was brilliant and amazing, and shout out to Paxton. But I've seen where I'll have a client that's dealing with a lawsuit where they're suing someone or they're being sued. And I'm like, you should call that person.
Right.
Like my attorney says not to. I'm like, it should be the first move that you do to find out, could you guys just come to an agreement? Because 90+% of the stuff settles anyway. Why are you going to drag this out in discovery if you could just get to the bottom line right now?
You're both going to spend a shitload
and you'll
of money.
also kind of know where you stand.
Yeah.
Like I got sued once. The guy sends me, the lawsuit. I call him before even calling an attorney. And he's like, I'm not supposed to talk to you. I'm like, there's nothing that says you can't talk to me. I know you got screwed in this deal. I made an introduction to someone. I didn't get paid. I wasn't there. You're in the financial space. This is your type of, why didn't you go after him? He goes, I did. He's bankrupt. I'm like, so why are you coming after me? He goes, well, my attorney, I can't talk about it. I'm like, well, what do you want? He invested like 250 grand in this real estate deal. He's like, I want 600 grand. I was like, for what? Punitive damage. I'm like, what? So I just realized then I called my attorney. I'm like, hey, he's up in the night. Turns out that attorney was like, let's see if we could win against Garrett because he's got a reputation. Then I can look at anyone that's ever done a real estate deal with this other guy that knows Garrett, and we'll see if we could create like a class action. Well, we went in court, and that guy applies to be a judge. His attorney and my attorney got that blocked because that case almost got thrown out twice before the jury got to it, because we're a litigious society, 20 million lawsuits in the United States, and there's no tort reform. So, I mean, basically someone could sue, they lose, no problem. You do that in England, you pay for the fees, right? So there's you better question whether it's worth it or not. So yeah, I get on that side of things personally.
Well, I think the other point that you made is a valid one, which is that there are lots of attorneys that even if, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about cost versus value, right? Cost, price, and value, is that there are tons of attorneys, and even if you feel like they took way too long to do something, it was super expensive, contract law, like it bothers me when my attorney spends 11 hours reviewing a really thick contract. And you know what? probably some of the best fucking money that I've spent.
I did not review the contract of a business sale.
Oh boy.
That was very expensive. And I would tell every client to review.
Yep.
And yet anyway, so that's money well spent for sure. I just spoke at CRISP, which is like this guy, Michael Mogul, created this program for attorneys, and it was his inner circle. And they were amazing. They were like, these guys are making 10, 20, up to $100 million a year because they built firms. They're not thinking in billable hours. They're thinking in a much bigger picture, and they were gracious and they were intelligent. So it made me feel really good. I was like, cool, like this is nice. Cause I've also talked to other ones where it's like, if they think about someone in the shower, they're charging in billable hours.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And they're using ChatGPT to write contracts.
Yeah. Jesus.
I've seen it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
that's fine, but they're still charging for,
that's
as if they're not using it.
Yeah. That's a problem. Well, in most contracts can be boilerplate. I mean, a ton of contracts can, right? And it's why the LegalZooms of the world, et cetera, have accelerated and done well. And a lot of stuff it doesn't need to be complicated. I was talking to a financial planner who really, he's like, his baseline is he won't take people that are less than 10 million liquid. And so that's like the starting point. And he's got a bunch of people that are, multi-100 million. And he's like, look, I don't need to give people investment advice at that level. He's like, I help them with taxes. And he was like, I help them with tax vehicles. He's like, I don't need to do investment stuff. He said, but what I'll tell you is that if somebody gets a deal and it can't be explained in one spreadsheet, it's too fucking complicated.
Exactly. There's probably some fraud in there somewhere, or I think if it can't be explained in a page, then there's a problem.
Yep. That was his take. I thought that was interesting. Well, so one of the things you just said was mindset. And that was where I think the bulk of your time with JP and that interview went.
Yeah.
And that's always been sort of a bizarre construct for me, because I found Tony Robbins when I was 18 or 19. Actually, Hal Elrod had told me about Tony Robbins, and Hal has a lot of energy.
It's funny how long you guys have known each other.
Isn't that crazy?
Right? There's this whole crew that you guys, Cutco crew, that's just like insane. How well you've all done, how you all run together, and how you had like fed your mind from an early age.
I am pretty vocal about like the extreme positive impact that Vector Marketing, which is the marketing arm of Cutco, has had on me. But I think that it is in no way hyperbole to say that that was the most impactful thing in my business career ever, and probably my personal life, because the skill set around being forced to create and do everything yourself. And what I mean by that is have ownership of things. And to be very clear, like they gave all the structure, the format, they gave me a playbook to play by, but they said, you have to create the schedule, you have to follow the schedule, you have to work. And then it was just a commission only gig, right? And so a lot of lessons from that. But Hal, at one point, we're at some conference, and I didn't have any exposure to personal development at all, right? At all growing up. And Hal said, oh yeah, there's this guy, and he's like ranting about this guy. And he's like, he does infomercials. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about right now? But he was like, no, he's different. He's different. And at the time, my TV was my alarm clock. It was like a gaming TV when I was 22 or 21 or something. And I had it set to wake me up at 6:30 a.m. But when I went to bed, I'd watch Comedy Central. Well, what plays on Comedy Central at 6:30 a.m.? Infomercials. So I wake up one morning and I hear this infomercial, and I can hear it when I wake up, and it's different. And I hear something different, and I'm like, oh shit. And it was an ad for Personal Power for Tony Robbins. And so on the way to my appointment, my first appointment, I called, and he had a great sales guy. So the sales guy answers the phone, and he tries to upsell me to a conference for like $5,000. And this is, 2000. And $5,000 seems just totally out of control expensive to me. And I'm like, no. And he's like, well, what's it going to cost you if you don't go? And I was like, motherfucker.
That's a good line.
It was a good line. I was like,
good
God
line.
damn it. But I got on that personal development train. And there was some point, I think, in the last like 10 years where I started to wonder, how much benefit came from being entrenched in the study of that versus it just being like fluffy bullshit. And I think it's an ongoing question that I like to ask more successful people about, because there are people that I talked to, like I just had Mike Dillard in here last week, and his answer surprised me. And he said, I basically don't spend any time on it at all anymore, like zero, because I feel like I developed into the person that I wanted to be, and now I spend no time on it. And the other side of that is the idea of I'm always learning and growing, and I always feel like I need to focus on it. And maybe he's just focusing on different things, or maybe he's not, or whatever. But how do you think about personal development and mindset and where it fits into business?
Yeah. So when I think back to still in college, I went to Landmark, right? And then I go through Forum, but I'm kind of like not really participating because I'm nervous and I want to look good and all that. And then someone called me out on it. So when I went to advanced course, I played full out. I got huge results, big growth. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to, go through programs that are going to challenge me. And a lot of that was kind of group programs, group personal development early on. I remember I went to Couples Connection, which Strategic Coach was putting on with my wife. We didn't even have kids yet. Everyone's like 20 years older than us, their kids our age. And so that was like, all those things were helpful until they weren't, until it was like, there was a little bit of a like, all right, what's next? And then it was for me to do more one-on-one, like somatic method and a little bit of journeying and, a little bit of one-on-one counseling and spiritual stuff. So it's like, to me, it's just different phases and different things, but there's always some calling to like, what's going to help me release limiting beliefs, develop myself, grow my skill sets. And so it's just what phase of life is it needed most? Like, I feel like the last 5 years, I cleared out a lot of like my childhood stuff that was still holding me back. Weird stuff like going through birth trauma stuff or going through like, timeline therapy or stuff like that. It was really effective because I could feel more peace. I could feel less scarcity. I could feel like more clarity. I also just was tackling a lot of things. But if I would have started there, I don't know if it would have been as effective as like being in these groups and seeing that, other people have these issues too, and having permission to explore and, learning how to just be myself, and like even going on the journey of comedy. That's like very much personal development, getting up on stage, being more expressed, designing what I want. So I'm always on the phone with someone at least once a month, one-on-one, that's helpful. I am listening to things and reading things. It changes over time. Some people are just addicted to it, and it doesn't lead to anything. It's a as my buddy Pat Gentempus says, a jacuzzi experience. It's fine while they're there, and then they go back and they don't integrate any of that into their life. So if that's the case, then I think that we have to go deeper into our earlier recesses of our life to heal whatever it is that's preventing that next layer and personalize it a little bit more. I wrote in Disrupting Sacred Cows, there was 3 pages at the end of like, here's the most important modalities that I found, certain brainwave function stuff I did at 40 years of Zen, MDMA, somatic therapy, EMDR, like those types of things helped me to deal with childhood stuff that were holding me back, that Landmark kind of showed me a little bit. Strategic Coach helped me to think bigger about like life and business and designing my life and taking days off. Like they all had their moments and their places, but eventually it was like, I needed more quiet time, more time up at my cabin, more time writing, not in everyone telling me what to do, just my own hobbies, listening to myself. So I think that where Mike's right is like, there's a certain point where you're like, hey, some of that stuff can all become a distraction. It can all just become an addiction. It can become an escapism, but there's other times where it's the catalyst that moves you forward. And at different points, we have different consciousness or different mindset. And some of those might actually hold us back at a certain point because of what they're about, right? So what setting matters, what the content is matters, and where we're at now in our life.
And for clarity, when you say journeying, do you mean doing drugs in the forest?
Yeah, I mean like doing at my cabin, doing some mushrooms a couple times. I mean, doing MDMA with a therapist that has an eye bag on me for 6 hours and walking through memories that are stored in my body, which sounds weird as shit. And I haven't ever done the ayahuasca trips or the 5-MeO or, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. I just kind of had a little stint where I did some journeying. It was super helpful. And then I was like, now it's time to go out and live life. So I'm not called to it right now.
Yeah.
But it was actually really helpful.
I buy it. I just like to poke at it because It actually goes directly to what you just said, which is there are people that do it and just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. And
I did it too much for a little while.
Uh-huh.
In 2021, I definitely did too much. And I could tell because some of my thinking was getting skewed and a little crazy, but my wife would be like, it's time to pump the brakes. You know, like she's like, maybe these are things that are not real that you're thinking of that aren't helpful anymore. And I was like, she's like, maybe the train wreck's gone off, you know, maybe the train's gone off the track a little bit. And I was like, yeah, I think I just like the feeling of it a little bit too much. And it's time to go ahead and do that. Like I did from 2018 till today, I did 9 somatic MDMA therapy sessions, never sooner than within 6 weeks. And those were super helpful. And the last time I did one was February of this year. And I was like, cool, I feel complete. But there was no more childhood stuff that was coming up. So I was like, I think, and I have no more physical pain, which a lot of physical pain is just stored emotional pain. But our brain tells us, oh, that physical pain is a distraction. You don't have to deal with your emotions. So it was helpful. But, you know, sometimes I was just getting high.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And I was like, cool, there's nothing harvested from this other than it was really fun for the moment. So I was like, cool, I just need to be the medicine. I need to kind of get out there and live life a little bit. So I've been.
What is the general format? You're calling it somatic therapy. What's the general format for MDMA therapy with a therapist for you that you've experienced?
Yeah, so the somatic method I've used with MDMA, MDA, and some people use cannabis or psilocybin. I tried cannabis. I just slept through it. It had no positive impact. I hated it. I woke up. I was high. Everything was slow. She's like, let's try a different strain. Slept through that. Woke up. So that's not my medicine. But MDMA, eye bag, start with the top of the head. She's like, let's do a check-in with the body. And then you just start at the top and then be like, ooh, I kind of have my left shoulders tight. She's like, all right, allow for the tightness. And then it's like, what's the emotion behind the tightness? And it would be like, shame. It's like, I don't know where this shit's coming from. It's like, then it'd take me back to some early childhood memory and we'd work through it and find out what the limited belief was. And it would release from the body, like it would sweat or move. And then we'd do a check-in again and, you know, just keep doing that until it was cleared.
Interesting.
So, and then MDA is a little bit stronger. It was a little bit more intense, but those are pretty light journeys overall. And then I did stuff that was like a combination where it was like, here's some MDMA or MDA with ketamine. And that would be like a deeper ego kind of goes to sleep. And I would talk, not knowing what I was saying because I had an eye mask and a headset on listening to music. And then I would transcribe that and kind of read what that would say. And felt like it had insights or messages or, you know, like instructions or healing and those kind of things. But again, that's the one that I think I just got to a point where I was like, cool, this is just doing drugs now.
Yeah, right.
This is just fun.
Yeah.
But I'm like not harvesting anything. So I stopped doing that.
The therapist from that stuff, so like one of the critiques also is that everybody's a shaman or some shit, right? So who do you go to for that kind of therapy? Who do you trust? How do you trust them?
We find an apartment in LA. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Referral based?
No. So what happened is I have a cranial sacral therapist. And when you and I were at Mastermind Talks in 2018 in Utah, Tucker talked about MDMA therapy. Dave Asprey talked about MDMA therapy. I just took a note. I was like, I should look into MDMA therapy. And then I couldn't move my right shoulder. I was doing German volume training with bench and it kind of agitated it. And then I was throwing the football with my son and all of a sudden I couldn't move my shoulder. So I was doing like prolozone and stem cells and dry needling and you name it. I was getting ultrasounds and x-rays, couldn't find out what was wrong with it, but it wasn't moving. And I was like, we're going on a trip and I don't want to just be walking around with one arm, you know? And so I was going to just do a cranial sacral session where they just kind of move the fluid up and down your spine. It's very relaxing. And I tried to schedule it and my therapist was like, oh, I'm booked out. And I was like, why? She's like, well, I'm doing MDMA therapy. So she went and did a bunch of training in Denver and had a somatic institute where she got certified. And so I started seeing her and it like one session, I had full range of motion in my shoulder. One session.
Jesus, that's so weird.
Full range. I was like, so there's like books like The Body Keeps the Score or The Great Pain Deception that talk a little bit about this, but I just experienced it firsthand. So I sent my dad. So I sent my sisters. So I sent a lot of friends and clients. And I trust her because I think set and setting matters so much. And I think that's a space where there's too much manipulation.
Yeah.
You know, I've been in medicine where someone's like, oh, you should invest in our project. And I'm like, or I've been in it with a group and all of a sudden I'm giving away stuff for free, like my time that I never would do because it's easy to be manipulated in that. And so who you're around really matters. And some people should just admit they're doing drugs.
I agree.
And other times it's very therapeutic, but like sometimes I was just doing mushrooms at my cabin.
I think both can be true too. I think that, you can be doing drugs and you can get insights from drugs. Yeah.
I've just been up at my cabin before when I had COVID and my wife's like, don't spread it to us. So I just went up there and at the end of the week, I'm like, I'm going to take some mushrooms.
Yeah. Well, I think set setting and dosage
yeah,
are also relevant, right? So like, I can have a glass of bourbon with somebody and it's going to deepen the conversation and open up the conversation to different things. And I will learn different things.
Yeah.
I can probably have 2, 3, or 4 glasses of bourbon actually, but there's going to be a tipping point where it's not going to be productive anymore. I won't remember it. Right. And who fucking knows what I'm saying? Just nonsense. And then I'm just doing drugs.
It's funny because I have this Kelsey is someone I talk to every other week. She's kind of like counsels me and is like just a mentor. And when I was doing a lot of journeying, she's like, yeah, you're really hard to manage right now. You're all over the place. Right. But it was also like good. I just go too fast. So I was like, I'm going to handle everything I've ever been out of integrity with. I'm going to have every conversation I need to have. I'm going to heal and it was like, it was a lot, And I was finally like, okay, like I could take this in stride.
How do you think that mindset impacts money for entrepreneurs specifically? So you talk a lot about in your book, you talk books. You've got 10 books from Wall Street Journal bestsellers, New York Times bestseller. Tons of books have been sold. A lot of that stuff talks about kind of frameworks for the middle class and how to invest as a middle class family. And some of it is just a mental shift in how you approach investing. Right. How do you think about that for the next level up in financial management?
Yeah. So the next level up, like we all have a money persona that creates success or sabotage in our finances. Some people just have a higher thermometer so they can handle more money. And then they eventually hit to a place where they feel like that's all they're worth. And whether they subconsciously or consciously understand it, they'll create sabotage if it gets beyond that level. They'll blow it. They'll spend it. They'll risk it. They'll fight about it. There's just so much that happens. You've seen this with people sell their business. All of a sudden they're a bunch of money. It's like they've just went to the gym. They've never squatted 400 pounds. And they're like, cool, I'm going to put 400 pounds on the bar because I've been killing it at 200 pounds and it cripples them. And that happens when that amount of money comes in if they're not a proper steward or they're not ready for it. That's where you see people take too much risk. They invest in too many things. They don't know how, like they have this great skill set in their business. Now they sold them. Now they go invest in areas where they have no skill set, but they buy into the story. So I think at the higher levels, it's just that their threshold is much higher. They can accept a higher level of stewardship because they grew their way there, where sometimes people just get stuck in this middle class place and they never evolve past that. So they their thermometer is just a lot lower. And so to be at 9 figures, you got to have some pretty substantial vision. There's got to be some level of value that's expanded beyond, and you've got to be willing to receive value from others. You've got to feel worth it. You got to be willing to ask. There's just so many things that people in the middle class just keep quiet about. They just don't ask for. They don't feel deserving of. They just work through. They just tolerate. And some people won't tolerate that because they're just more committed to the value they want to bring to the world and the vision that they have. And they don't let any of these like mindset blocks stop them because they just continue to evolve. I mean, if you listen to The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, I thought it was a pretty amazing, I've listened to it a couple of times.
Is that his most recent book?
That's his most recent. Right? Yeah, I think it's his only one. And he's just like, the artists that keep producing art are the artists that continue to work on themselves so they can receive the art. And he's like, those that don't work on themselves might have a hit and they never reproduce it because they stop being in a place where they could receive it. And so we have to be in a place where we could receive. So in my book, Money en Masse, the first line is, what would you do with $1 billion? First question. Very confronting. If someone's like, I don't know what to do, because it's hard to go spend $1 billion.
Right.
That's a hard thing to be like, I'm going to spend that. So you have to be in this thought process of value creation. And it gets a gap where people are like, wait, how would I create enough value? Now, if you're trying to transform the financial industry or transactions and how they happen for someone with easy pay, like that's a multi-billion-dollar idea. So there's plenty of momentum. But if it's it's my goal to make $2 million. Like that, it just doesn't equate, because one's about impact, reach, value. And I'd say that if you're not sure what to do with those large numbers, you have to think bigger. You have to focus on impact. You have to know your value. And that question haunted me in my 20s, because I just felt insignificant and stupid that I couldn't answer it.
You said a couple of things that I want to hit on, because there's a lot of that I would normally hear, or I do hear, and think it's sort of this ethereal, interesting concept without any tactical advice in it. But I think a couple of things that you said are pretty tactical, like people are unwilling to work through the things that somebody else who really wants it badly is willing to work through. And a couple of things that popped up for me through that are directly mindset, is you're going after something and you get uncomfortable in a moment to ask because you're afraid you're going to look stupid, or you're uncomfortable to ask because you think that you're already supposed to know the answer and you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of a certain group.
Right.
Or you're supposed to be a leader, and what you think a leader is somebody that knows everything.
Has everything.
Yeah. And I think that being able to be vulnerable certainly has to be a part of that.
Our vision has to be bigger than our escape route. So we all have escapisms. Like some people's escapisms, they get caught up in a TV or movie character rather than their own reality. So when they don't know how to deal with things, it's easy to numb out with social media or the news or politics, but then they never know the price of the relationship with themselves, because it's always about something outside of themselves. It's always blame, it's victimhood, it's chaos, it's the economy, it's someone else's fault. And so our escapisms can be starting to get addicted to watching sports or playing video games or anything that has us hijack or sabotage the result that we want. Mm-hmm. Like when I was like, I'm going to film a comedy special, dude, that was confronting, because I was like, well, am I that funny? My wife says no. So I was like, and then I was like, I had to deal with those insecurities and those escapisms. So anything we delay or choose not to address, we're either playing not to lose by hiding from it. Those are the people that hold on to what they've got, or playing to win, running to something else so that we don't have to address that. And so people get busy doing things that aren't as productive. Like you can get busy and make $1 million, but you can't get busy and make $10 million, because it requires a team. It isn't just you doing a Herculean effort. And yet that escapism is, well, I'm too busy to do that. I'll do that later. So they don't realize that that's a sabotaging thing, right? Playing to win or playing not to lose. So if they sweep things under the rug and hope they go away, escapism. If they delay or choose not to address something, then, that destroys peace of mind and prosperity. Or if they pretend like future projects are so important, they don't have time for this thing that they say that they really want. Yeah. They continue to let themselves off the hook with their trump card. Their trump card is anything that's an escape from this vision. Because if you're going to have a vision, a 9-figure business or greater, you're going to be confronted, because you're going to be in a realm that is so few people have been in, that there isn't just an easy map of how to get there. Right? There's an easy map of going to college, getting a student loan, putting money in a retirement plan, paying off a home, and being unfulfilled for 30 years, working in a job with benefits. That's an easy map. It's like shit hard life long term, but it's an easy out right from the beginning. But to be like, I listen to Jerry Seinfeld. He talks about how he didn't get paid for comedy and how he's working his ass off. And, and then he sees Eddie Murphy pull up in a fancy car and he's like, holy shit, you can make that much money doing comedy? And a seed is planted. But, even when him and Larry David are doing Seinfeld, they're just relentlessly working and working and working to build the foundation. And they have to do this work before it blossoms and before it comes out, not knowing if every action is going to lead to an outcome. It's just that resilience of, I'm going to love the work and I'm going to do the work. And too many people opt out because of that fear, that scarcity, that roadblock, that escapism, that bump in the road, whatever it is, because life doesn't go according to plan.
Yeah, basically ever.
No, ever.
So I think you hit on exactly what I wanted you to, which is the word sabotage. And I sort of forgot it, but I think that's one of those words, like the way that you originally framed it was you use the thermometer analogy, and people get to a point where they start to sabotage themselves. And it's really hard to recognize or to reconcile this notion that you are sabotaging yourself, and being aware that's being self-aware enough to pick apart your life and see the areas that you are deliberately spending time on that you don't need to be, in the absence of progress towards something that you say is very important to you, is another way to say sabotage.
Right. And that's like success requires a degree of consistency. And the problem is most people go this far and then they abandon it before the consistency has time to pay off.
Yeah.
Because we are conditioned and indoctrinated to get short-term payoffs for that dopamine hit. And it's harder to have that longer-term vision of, hey, I have a vision that's so big, it's going to take some time to develop. And it's so big, I don't know how to achieve it on my own. So it's going to require bringing people along. I have a mentor. Do you know Rick Sapio? He mentored me back in the day.
No, I know that name.
So Rick, he would have lunch every month with this billionaire, Phil Romano. And Phil had this great idea. And he's like, Rick, do you know anyone that could run this? And Rick's like, no, but I'll keep an eye out. So they have lunch the next month. He's like, Phil, how's the business going? He's like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, like, how's it going? He's like, oh, you're a multimillionaire. That's really cute. I'm a billionaire. The difference between us is you'd be hustling and grinding and working your ass off in this business. I'm looking for the right talent to build this business. He's like, we fundamentally are viewing the world differently. And when Rick told me that story, I thought of like my life and I was like, oh yeah, I'm just like rushing to get it done, trying to make it happen, doing too much on my own, getting overexhausted. So it's hard to keep that consistency. You think of like the people that are the biggest at what they do have been consistent for so long. Like Chappelle was doing comedy as a teenager.
Right.
So, to be considered the GOAT or one of the GOATs, that came from a lot of, like, if you hear his early times, like there's a ton of work that goes into it. Yet all people see is this end result. They don't want to do all the work that it takes to get there. And then they're wondering why they don't have what that person has. Well, first off, don't model someone else because you might not have the same intention, skill set, attention, ability, passion. And so if you try to model that, you're going to run out of steam.
Yeah.
When you find out who you are and what you're really capable of and the skill set you're willing to develop and the business you're willing to stay consistent to, that's the mistakes I've made in the past. Insurance was just convenient. And the nice thing is with what the Rockefellers do, I figured out how to stay with that over a lifetime because the conversation of legacy is something I love to talk about every day. It is something I'm like I just spoke at Mark Moss's event and, they love the Rockefeller story of all the things we talked about for 2 days. And I love telling it and it was fun and I'm telling jokes. And so I found if I use comedy in my speeches, I'll be giving speeches 30 years from today, teaching finance, not in a boring, mundane way. So I'm finding out what all those ingredients are that uniquely make me that I can stay consistent with for a long period of time. I mean, you watch me in the early days of my theatrical keynote, this like where I act out the 4 characters and I'm picking up the guitar. And dude, I was early on, right? I was not a good actor. Like it was painful.
We were in a friend's living room with 8 people and you were standing in front of us in the living room doing your thing.
And you were like, dude, you usually just get up and speak off the cuff. It's good to see you struggle your ass off trying to memorize something. Yeah. You're like respect and you've got a long way to go is how you said it without saying all those words. But yeah, I was like, here we are. I started that in 2019.
Yeah.
I rehearsed it this week.
Yeah.
I'll rehearse the next. I'd added a musical score to it. I hired Larry Moss, the acting coach, the coaches. I'm just like, I can dedicate 20 years to it because there's more depth to it every single day. And I'm more excited about it. And so it might take me, I'm about to do it for 3,000 attorneys and got paid my full speaking fee and Ludacris is performing at it. So it's kind of cool. And the first time I did do it live at a real estate event for full fee, someone came up and hugged me and told me about their brother's suicide and that they hadn't been able to talk about it. So I'm like, yes, I'm into this world of connection. It's sharing my values. I can stay committed to that, but nobody knows what the hell a one-man show is. I told my wife, I'm going to do a one-man show. She's like, what the fuck is that? I'm like, I know. The first time I heard someone say they're doing a one-man show, that was my response too. And then they crushed it. So we just got to find that thing that we're willing to dedicate to. That's why I believe in create a life you don't want to retire from.
Yeah.
Because if we just sacrifice, then we just end up with a shitty life. And then we're doing things out of drudgery, which drains our energy. And if we don't have much energy, we're not that good to anyone, really.
So I agree with you 100%. The question that I like to ask people is, do you think that a 25-year-old entrepreneur should keep trying to find that, or should they make money and then find it? Or is there a balance?
Yeah, I think my buddy Rich Christensen has a book called The Zigzag Principle. He's like, have your vision, but don't run straight for it. If you run straight for it, you're going to run out of steam. Cash flow first, resources second, scale third, cash flow, resources, scale, zigzag your way there. So to sit there and be like, I'm trying to find my passion on my couch at home doing nothing isn't very helpful.
Right.
I think that insurance was a good part of my journey.
Yeah.
It was good data. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to sell. I learned the value of risk versus non-risk. I learned the value of the different policies. It became an ingredient towards the What Would the Rockefellers Do, which is my most prolific work that I've done. And that led me to meet fascinating people on legacy, including this woman, Sheila, that worked for the family office for the Rockefeller family, including people that mentored the Rockefellers that are now mentoring me. It's like, it was an amazing journey. If I didn't have that initial piece, I don't know if this would be there. So if we just chase our passion, shit, we can hear anyone on any corner talking about passion, but passion without proper skill and frame equals bankruptcy. It equals loneliness. It equals nothingness. Like, be passionate about a hobby, find ways that you can evolve. Yep. But if you think it's all just going to be perfect right from the get-go, I mean, maybe that happens for some. I don't think it happens for many.
I think very, very, very few. And I think even the people that does seem to happen for, I think that vision is curated through experience.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the experience, you don't have the ammunition to construct a vision in many cases.
Right. You agree with me then?
You're brilliant.
We're on the same page. Well, because I don't know if we're on the same page of that. You just asked me a question. I was like, interesting to hear what
I very
say.
much believe that. I really think that my approach to life has been, one of the reasons I ask is because I think that it's I think that it's sort of the journey of life to figure that out. My path has always been, I don't know what my grand vision is. I don't know what I'm like endlessly passionate about, where I'm pulled to the future. But in the meantime, I'm going to fucking work like hell to make sure that I'm continuing to grow and develop and check the other boxes while I figure it out.
It's a lot better to be in the world of value creation and have value creation with contemplation instead of contemplation and nothing else.
Yes. So I have to ask you financial questions because you once told me that financial advisors are like strippers.
Nice. I'm sure that I did, and I'm not surprised to say these words.
Yeah.
But
can you think of the context for that?
Well, financial advisors are like strippers because strippers present that you think it's going to be this great thing, but you find out, it's like the song, I Fell in Love with a Stripper. It's like, wait. Now, when I talk about financial advisors, I'm talking about like these fee-based advisors that have all the right things that they tell you. I'm a fiduciary. They bring the douche to fiduciary quite often, but they're taking a fee off your money, whether you make money or not.
Yes.
So they're taking money from your pocket and you don't even notice it. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what did I get for all this? And it's quite a disappointment. I think strippers are usually a disappointment for people,
I think that's probably
they're not soulmates.
A safe statement,
right?
For almost all.
Right. I mean, I remember telling my wife for my bachelor party, I'm like, dude, strip club's probably the safest place we can go. I'm like, nobody ends up with hooking up with the strippers. And we had 20 people that went, and 2 of them hooked up with strippers, including your brother. And I was like, so much for that philosophy. Like, I thought it was, look but don't touch. But
and Garrett never went to a strip club again.
I remember, I go, and then she's like, I'm really glad you didn't go to a strip club for your bachelor party. I was like, is this a trick question?
Yes, it is.
I said that we were going, and we definitely went. Like, are we good?
Yep.
I think that we had a little bit of an argument, but we're still married. So
it's worth something.
Yeah, I at least was honest about it. I was like, we definitely went to strip club. We went to Vegas for my bachelor party.
Yeah, that has to involve a strip club, I think, for a bachelor party.
Yeah.
Oh, also, weren't you like 22 when you got married or some shit?
I was 23, so I was pretty young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the choice you're going to make every time, I think, when you're 23.
Yeah, we had a lot of people down there at that strip club, and the one wasn't that wasn't the nicest one. I do remember that. I do recall that.
Yeah.
There was no threat. There was nothing to worry about.
That is maybe comedy, but like there's some brutal strip clubs out there.
Yeah, like sometimes it's like this notion of you're not going to find what you want financially by getting a portfolio. Like financial independence is having enough cash flow from your assets to cover your expenses. Where are you getting that from a financial planner? Plugging financial leaks by not overpaying tax or interest or non-performing fees with investments or hidden commissions that don't help, or improper design with insurance. Like most planners aren't doing that. They're not making sure that you get your legacy planning done. They're basically saying, here's a retirement plan, put your money in here, and 30 years from today, you're going to be happy, but you're not going to be happy. 95% of people are not financially independent. So it's a promise that isn't actually being fulfilled. And it's not that financial planners are bad people. They're just in a bad system. They're compensated for selling a book of business for 12 to 15 times EBITDA that they got paid money on 1% a year quite often along the way. So if they're managing $1 billion, which they're not trading, they're just handing it off to some firm, right? They're making some decisions on it, but not every decision. It's more acquiring customers. 1% of $1 billion isn't a bad income every single year.
Right. Yeah. Misaligned incentives.
If I do the math, I think it's $10 million, right?
That's pretty good math, I think.
Not bad. So then they can sell that for 12 to 15 times EBITDA.
Oh, shit.
Woo.
Yeah. You said that and it didn't really sink
That's
in.
nice, right?
Yeah, for
you
sure.
get paid then, and then you get paid. And so it's like, they used to hammer, oh, you get paid so much insurance commission. I'm like, I get paid a lot up front, a little bit over time. And it's still not anything compared to selling a book of business, because I can't sell that book of business like you would, like when I found out 401ks were what they were, it wasn't a good day for me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm going to make a lot less money, because if I believed in them, they're easy to sell. So many people do them, 70 plus million Americans. But the problem is they lack cash flow. They're government controlled. There's tons of fees, legal admin, 12B1s, fueled by mutual funds, which I think underperform to other asset classes out there. They don't help with that financial independence. The government can change the rules along the way. I mean, there's too many things that I'm like, this is a stripper. There's herpes. There's fake boobs. There's a lot of stuff that's, going on here.
And it also goes back to it's not a one-page explanation.
And sorry for the strippers that don't have herpes. I felt like that was that was the comedian in me, not a judgmental prick. Just the comedian.
So it is almost Q4 2024. We're recording just before the turn into Q4. We're going into an election. How do you think Donald Trump winning or Kamala Harris winning will impact one's ability to make money?
Well, I don't think it's going to matter who gets in for the tax sunset. So the Tax Jobs Cut Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
TCJA, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, TCJA, it goes away January 1st, 2026. It sunsets. In order for that not to sunset, we have to have the House, Senate.
Give me bullets on what that is.
Qualified business deduction, Section 199A, lowering the tax rates for most business owners. Gone. Top tax rate, 37.5%. The marginal rates where you get the higher tax rates kick in later than the old system. Like it's just all the old tax system. So it's going to be pretty massive hit to people that have been used to paying less tax when that sunsets. And if Trump gets elected, I still don't see the House and Senate both being Republican. And even if they are, do they agree with Trump? It doesn't feel like they're all totally aligned there in that party.
You think?
We already know that that's not going to happen if Kamala gets in, because she's already talking about all sorts of different taxation, and we're $35 trillion in debt. So they're inflating their way out of that debt the best that they can, because it's easier to create inflation than it is to collect taxes. It's just a stealth tax. So what we're going to find more than anything is the mindset of the people. I have a guy that guides me in hunting, and he's always like, oh yeah, when Trump got elected, I started building houses. When Biden got elected, I stopped doing that. What? We have a housing shortage. Regardless of who's president, you're going to be, oh, no. I'm going to get so I think we give too much credence to the president. And I think the biggest issue with whoever gets elected is that a lot of people are going to be pissed that their person didn't get in, and they think the other person is the devil. When you talk to people, they think that Trump is an egomaniac and that he's a narcissist and that he's going to destroy the country. And yet he was president, and even during COVID, and here we are, still going. People think if Kamala is going to get in, communism's coming back, and so that's a concern for people. I think the bottom line is we're concerned about the president, where we need to be more concerned about our own life and our own business, because they're going to make whatever changes they're going to make. You better open up as many doors, have as much value creation, and I would just say more than anything, create your tax plan now, because if you wait, you're going to get crushed, because taxes are going to get worse either way. It's just, I don't see how they're not going to get worse.
So one of the challenges that I have from a tax perspective with different tax strategists is you get this a lot of tax vehicles are about deferment.
I hate deferment.
I get it.
Yep.
And at the same time, earlier today, you were talking to JP about how important it is for people to be able to generate more money quickly so that they can compound that money. Mm-hmm. So deferment does allow you to compound the money quicker.
You just have to have an exit because you're compounding your tax at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you did a Roth or a traditional, just say you could do either one. You have less money going to the Roth because it's after tax. Pre-tax goes in the traditional. So the traditional grows to a bigger amount in the future. Mm-hmm. If tax rates stay level when you pull that money out, you'll end up with the same net amount as you had in the Roth. But if you're going to live off interest of the two accounts, you're going to have more interest kicked off in the traditional than the Roth. It's just, again, you still have to pay tax on that unless you can create an offset. So if someone's like 58, 59, like it's a little bit different because you can start taking that money out pretty soon. If you're younger and you're deferring it that long, I just don't know what the taxes are going to look like in the future. Yes, it will grow to a bigger amount, but if taxes go up, you'll have less in the end. Mm-hmm. If taxes go down, you'll have more. I just don't think taxes are going down. So I'm all about how do we find tax credits, tax deductions? How do we find tax strategy that actually permanently eliminates the tax, not just delays the tax? And, you know, even in real estate, people roll it over and that's still a deferment, but at least you could borrow against it. You know, retirement plans, you can, but they have a lot more restrictions and limitations. Whereas as a brokerage account, you have more opportunity. So yeah, I have a tax navigator. If people want it, they can just like put BAM in Instagram, Garrett Gunderson. I'll just give them the tax navigator. I mean, I'm selling it right now, but I'll just give it to your viewers. And they can just go down the checklist. Immediate tax savings, intermediate and advanced tax savings, and then just find out what applies to them, what doesn't apply to them. But I want them to have as many doors open so that if they do change taxes, they have a few things that they could pull to offset that. Yeah,
I love that. I feel like the tax thing is a never-ending game that warrants spending a shitload of time on, because it is the largest line item if you're not careful.
It's huge.
How much time do you think you should spend on it relative to wealth creation?
So my feeling is on the initial setup, it might be like 5 hours or something if you have the right tax team. I can bring the right tax team to people. I've been vetting tax people for a very long time. If you're going to go find it on your own, it's tough. It's tough for me, and I'm in the business. And so, but for me right now, it's 20 to 30 minutes a quarter that I meet with my tax team. We brainstorm, we go over the numbers. We just had a meeting last week. You know, we talked about, hey, here's where we're at. What does everything look like? Is there any additional strategies we need to brainstorm? If we do, we might set up one more meeting a week or two later, bring on a tax attorney, talk through a few more things. But if you meet once a quarter and you have a decent team, you can get it to as 20, 30 minutes a quarter. Now, that setup is the key.
Yeah.
That overhaul initially, looking at last 3 years' taxes, developing strategy. Like I've done events where I just spend a day and help people build that out over a day. People hire me to do that one-on-one. We build that out. You know, it could be efficient. It's just the overhaul that's the pain.
Yeah. I was listening to somebody talk the other day, and he was a wealth advisor, a like true tax strategist planner. And somebody asked him advice. He was on stage. Somebody asked him advice. And he said, I mean, I can say a bunch of things to sound smart right now, but honestly, I won't have any fucking idea until I spend like 4 hours with you listening to your actual setup, you know? And I thought that was I love hearing that honesty. I just love hearing that openness, because everybody's system is different. Everybody's structure is different.
I'm trying to give people a framework with this like 3 buckets and like the ways, who's on the team, what are the main tax deductions to look at, how do you classify your income, and then just a checklist where you'd be like, oh, this could apply to me, or I'm not sure, or it doesn't. So that way you now have a way to proactively navigate with your accountant. Because normally what happens is they are overwhelmed. They don't have 4 hours to spend with you. So now you know what to ask. Now you know what to talk about.
Yeah.
Because I've pretty much exhausted all the fairway strategies, all the stuff that's right down the middle, black and white, no gray area. You're not going to get in trouble with a single one of those things on there. They're golden. I mean, and that even means, I mean, Puerto Rico's on there. You can move to Puerto Rico. I just don't want to move to Puerto Rico.
No, me either.
You know, and you have to actually move there, and you have to, you know, there's people
that's
like,
the whole thing.
Or people like, I want to pay my kids. Great, you can. You just have to have them do the work. And if they don't do the work, then you can't really take the write-off. You know, that's the rule. Like a lot of people want these hacks, but they're doing things that are a little bit in the gray area. You can just do the right things down the middle and you're fine.
Yeah. And my question with taxation is always, what does it look like on audit? Right. And so if I'm talking to,
can you sleep at night and will you be fine in audit?
Yeah. And what I'll ask anybody that's trying to sell me a product for tax deferment or, heaven forbid, avoidance. There you go. Is how many times have you seen this get audited and what was the result?
Yeah. And there are tax strategies that I've personally done that increase chance of audit for me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I tell my clients about them, there's only a few, I'm like, you could increase your chance of audit, but never go to your own audit. You always have the tax team handle the audit. If you're organized and they go on the offensive, the likelihood is you'll save tax during an audit. I was just speaking at this event, and Jason Hartman, he was there.
Oh yeah,
he got audited, $450,000. They had to give him back after the audit.
That's amazing. He's aggressive.
I was like, $450,000 during his audit, they gave him back. I thought that was hilarious.
I love that.
That was a pretty interesting story because I told a story about I've had a couple clients get audited.
Yeah.
In the entire 25 years I've been doing this, 2 people have had to pay any money. They were negligible amounts compared to what they're doing, because we're not doing it. Like, I'm not doing anything offshore. There are some legitimate offshore things, but you are definitely going to be a target if you do offshore stuff. It's just how it is.
Yeah. I think since Obama, since 2008, offshore seems to be scrutinized more heavily. I think he was the one that...
Remember the Panama Papers? I mean, that...
I don't remember that.
Yeah, they found all these papers for all these offshore trusts and where assets were held that were very private documents, and then made it public information.
God. What's the dumbest thing you've ever done financially?
I sold my a business without reading the contract. That's the stupidest thing I've ever done, for sure. Or having an attorney review it.
What was the impact?
It was millions of dollars. Millions.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was bad. It's embarrassing.
I love it.
I hate being this honest.
No, it's great, dude. I can see it on your face.
I would never allow a client to do what I did ever.
Yeah.
I just thought, if it's the right person, no contract will matter. If it's the wrong person, no contract was due, is a stupid statement that I thought, and that's not true.
I think that is true, and you still need to have a fucking contract.
Right. Well, I wouldn't have transferred the shares when I did. I would have had a lot more control.
Yep.
Like, there's a lot, it worked really well for 2 years. And then when it didn't work, it was like, I could have definitely negotiated. I could have had the database copy. There's just a lot of things I could have done. This is what happens when you're disenchanted, if you let things go too long.
Yeah. I do firmly believe, though, that, especially you mentioned this earlier, like, you're making choices now for your business about how you want your lifestyle to be. And one of those things, when you're younger, it's harder to do this, or when you're living in more of a place of scarcity, truly, it's harder to do this. But if you feel like a situation or a human is questionable that you're about to do a deal with, don't fucking do it.
You're better to miss an opportunity than to get in something that is going sideways.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It messes with your confidence. It hijacks your time. It's not good.
Yeah, the time becomes the most valuable thing, for sure.
It occupies so much space.
That's the big thing.
So much energy.
The big thing is the mental bandwidth.
The only benefit is you get sexy ass gray hair. But other than that, everything else sucks.
I love it. Well, let me go show you some real estate. We'll wrap this up. Do you want to point people anywhere? Where do you? Oh, you know what? Your special just came out on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, the American Ream.
Love it.
Amazon Prime, Garrett Gunderson, or my website, GarrettGunderson.com. I got some cool tools there. I got a weekly newsletter. Every now and again, I try to sell people stuff that are on it. Can you believe that? Most of the time, I'm just writing blogs and sharing my insights. But yeah. And if people want the tax navigator, they just hit me up on Instagram, Garrett B. Gunderson. Direct message me, bam, and I'll hook them up.
Love it, BAM. Love it, man. Always good to hang out.
Dude, good to see you, man.
You too.
We went on a whole medicine aspect. We
all over the fucking place.
Shit on attorneys for a minute.
Yeah, we did. We'll see how those reviews
Thank God for the good ones.
Yeah, right. That's great, man.